Thank you all so much for joining us for the Mentoring Resources panel. Joining us today are Seval Yildirim, Vice President for Diversity Initiatives and Chief Diversity Officer, Dr. Valarie Burke, Assistant Dean of Graduate Student Services, and Dr. Sara Jordan, Program Director and Professor of the Couple and Family Therapy Program. So they're going to be helping us develop an understanding of what makes a good mentor, share some resources available for mentoring, and answer any questions that we may have in the realm of this topic. So we're going to go ahead and start with having our panelists introduce themselves, and then we're going to open it up for questions. So Sara, will you please get us started?
Sure. Thank you for the introduction. Yes, I'm in couple and family therapy. We have a master's program here. I'm the program director. I'm also a grad faculty fellow, and I enjoy serving on these panels. And yeah, I enjoy our hour together today.
Thank you. Seval?
Hi, everyone. I'm Seval Yildirim. I'm the Vice President for Diversity Initiatives and the Chief Diversity Officer. Before my position, I'm pretty new to campus, right? About 9 months. And before this, I was the Associate Provost for Faculty Affairs and Development and the Chief Diversity Officer at Cal State San Bernardino. And in that capacity, I was also in charge of the university's relationships with the graduate students union. Cal State is entirely unionized. And in that capacity and combined with my faculty development oversight duties, we offered various programs for graduate student development to create pathways into the professoriate. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much. And Valarie?
Hello, everyone. You might recognize my name because I send y'all emails, but as Nevena said, I am the Assistant Dean for Graduate Student Services. I've been in this role, I think, about 9 years now. Prior to this, I was an undergrad academic advisor. So it's interesting. Sometimes I will have seen students who I advised in undergrad now in grad school, and we can reminisce about our times of y'all getting your bachelor's degree and now master's or a PhD. I did get my PhD here at UNLV in sociology. I got that in May of 2019. So hopefully I can bring that experience to this panel too, of kind of just the background I have as a student being in your spot and having an advisory committee and a mentor. And then also in my seat now where I see all of your appeals, things that may have gone maybe off track with mentoring and how we can kind of get in front of that now. And I also helped create our mentorship certificate here in the Grad Academy. So I'm ready for questions with my other prestigious panelists.
Thank you all so much. We look forward to having a great conversation today. So just to get us started while everyone is thinking about questions they might want to ask of our panelists, I will start with the first one, and that is, what does good mentoring look like to you? And I can have you, if anyone wants to go first, or I can tap someone in to go. Sara, you want to get us started?
Sure, I can start. So I have been a faculty member here for almost 5 years, and I was at Texas Tech for 12 years. So gosh, that makes me a lot older than I feel like. 17 years in academia. And I would say in terms of mentorship or having a mentor that's a positive, I would say my experience as a mentee in your roles as well. So for me, being a student, graduate student, good mentoring to me looked like a faculty member who really invested in my project, my dissertation, my thesis, whatever I was working on. It was someone who I had an open door policy, who I felt like I could go to with questions, who was on my side, was cheering for me, who wanted my success, who valued my time and their time. And I would say I have taken those experiences as a student, and I've really tried hard as a faculty member to remember those things as I'm mentoring students, and what would I want or what did I want as a student, and try to provide those things for my students. And so to me, a mentor is more than just someone you have take a class with or do a research project with, but it's really someone who invests in you as a person and is interested and invested in your long-term success. And for doc students, it's perhaps an academic position. For master students, it's perhaps going out into industry, and can be someone. In fact, I was running like a minute late, and one of my former students from Texas Tech, who I also served as a supervisor, and I've known her for probably 12 years, reached out and said, "Help, I need help." And so I took her call in between my meetings. And so to me, that's what a good mentor is. Someone who's always there, even if they graduate, even if they get licensed, and they move on, it's still someone that, you would reach out to.
Thank you. Seval, would you like to add?
Sure. I think mentorship really is about meeting the mentee where they are, right? And so this really speaks to the mentee's background, their race, ethnicity, whether they're an international student or not, their gender. So all the demographics that make us the people that we are, right? And so we speak a lot about equality, but for me, equality is just giving everybody the same thing, right? It's about inputs. Equity, on the other hand, is understanding where people are so that we can give them the tools they need so that the outcomes are equitable. Outcomes are similar, right? And so for me, that's what good mentorship is, understanding where your mentee is and continuing to foster them and make sure that you're meeting their needs, whatever they may be. And I think it's also a long-term process, right? It's not just talking to people, once a week and say, "Hey, how is it going?" And they say, "Great," and you call it a day. It's looking forward ahead of time, where do you want to be 5 years, 10 years from now, and helping them gain the tools and the experiences they need to be able to get to that point. So I think I forgot to mention, but I'm a law professor by profession before I became a central administrator. And so, the joy in mentoring a student, and so all my mentees were obviously graduate students. The joy really is seeing where they end up and how they, in some ways, surpass you, and they can come back and you learn from them. So just keeping that humility as a mentor is, I think, really important as well.
Thank you so much. Val?
Sure. Just to add a few things from my experience on both ends. If you haven't selected your mentor yet, when I was seeking mine, one of the best advice that I got was it's obviously someone's in your department. When you applied to your program, you had looked at the faculty and what their research is and how it matches yours. So you'd want to pick a mentor that is doing research in your area. And that might change. So that happened to me. I ended up changing my dissertation topic, I want to say my second year in. So therefore I had to change my mentor. And that was okay. Things are in place for that to happen. And if you want to make sure that your mentors, knows what your goals are so that they can look out for you, right? So I didn't know about, national organizations in my field and things once, I had finalized my research topic and things like that they are, your mentor is already a part of, so that you can kind of come in under their wing and they can introduce you for networking and let you know, you can present at these types of conferences. This is funding that you can apply for. So, they know what your goals are. And then the other thing is you don't know what you don't know. And I experienced that as a student firsthand. I wasn't in the grad college yet, obviously being here now, I know everything. But before that, things like make sure you're reading your weekly emails, but we need to make sure too, the mentors, they're staying up to date on their training. So we want to, make sure our a good mentor is somebody who's keeping up on their, professional development, and that they're engaged in their publishing, so they can, then bring you into those worlds that you might be interested in. I didn't know anything about grant writing whatsoever, I'd say, until like my last year in my program. So that was a nice connection that my mentor helped with. And they weren't, they were kind of on their way to retirement. So that was something, though, they kind of connected me to the grad college with, since we have, specific programs here. So you don't 100% have to rely on your mentor for everything, but they are a great resource. We want to make sure they know their resources so they can help you. And then I would say the last thing is timelines. So making sure your time to degree, your timeline, if you have, your publishing goals, or you have, I want to graduate by this day and working backwards, you two staying on the same page so that you're taking your coursework lock and step, because there's certain classes you can't take without previous ones, and your mentor should have all that information as well. Thanks, Nev.
Thank you all for sharing your unique perspectives based on your unique experiences you all had. So a lot of our attendees here are currently graduate students that are aspiring to go into academia and become professors, and others are aspiring to go into industry and be leaders in their fields. I think for both of these paths, mentorship is going to play a huge role in their journeys once they get into these leadership roles, whether it's academia or industry. Is there a structure or framework that they can follow as they begin to step into their own roles as mentors, to kind of help them get acclimated to that role?
I guess what I would suggest is, even when you step into the role as a mentor, you still need a mentor. I think it's always important to have a mentor, even when you're stepping in and having mentees. So kind of you're sandwiched in between. I think that's really important. As a therapist in clinical practice, we always really stress to our students, even when you're licensed and you're out doing your own work, you want to make sure that you are reaching out to your peers, or you have someone to bounce ideas off, because you don't want to, practice in isolation. I think the same thing is for mentoring. Keeping up with, it's been mentioned, keeping up with the new policies or things that are going on, or what's happening in the grad college. These are all going to be important pieces for you. You're going to need a good mentor becoming a mentor, just as you're going to be mentoring students as well. So I would suggest that piece. And in terms of someone, and then if something happens where, sometimes you move, or you don't have as much contact with your mentor, let's say here after you graduate, finding someone in the industry or in your new university, if you're going academic route, seek out a mentor. Sometimes some universities have it built in where they can assign you to a formal structure mentorship, but not all universities do. If you're interviewing for an academic position, I would have that be one of my questions. What is the mentoring of junior faculty like at this institution? What resources do you provide as an institution, or even in the industry, for mentorship? Because you want to make sure that you are supported as you were developing into this role. And if they don't, because I had that experience early on in my career, I reached out to someone and said, would you, in not so many words, mentor me in this process and develop that relationship. So yeah, I think that's really important.
I think, in the industry, mentorship is a bit different, right? So you don't call it that often. You just kind of find someone you click with who understands your experiences, and without being too demanding, right? Because it's not higher education anymore. I think you can certainly build those relationships. If you are going into higher education, and I say this having been both in industry and in higher education for a long time, in higher education, I think increasingly there are mechanisms of mentorship available to junior faculty. In my 2 previous positions, I was charged with building those mentorship systems. So I'm happy to talk to anyone on the call later separately, since especially since I have to leave a bit early from the call. But I think I agree with Sara. When you're interviewing for these jobs, I also oversaw searches in my previous position for tenure line faculty, and interviewed probably about 300 faculty across different disciplines in the last 4 years. So I'm happy to chat about the interview processes and all of all aspects of becoming a professor, right? In different disciplines across the board. I think it's really important to understand the resources you have available to you at the institution you're going to, including mentorship resources. So there may not be a central system of mentorship, but it is possible that that mentorship exists at the department level, at the college level, and it's important to find out upfront before you make your decision about the offer, what those resources look like. So I'll leave it at that.
I think that's pretty full on that one, Ashley.
Thank you all. So can you talk a little bit on, if I am serving in a mentor role, how can we help our mentee without telling them what to do? Kind of how to guide them without just giving them the answers?
I'll start. If for me, it's asking questions, right? So you could be the one asking the questions as opposed to always giving the answers. And what I've learned over time too is showing them where the answers are, so that perhaps next time they'll know how to find them. What's that saying? Teach them how to fish instead of just giving them the fish. So then they'll know how to help themselves next time. Because, I mean, let's be honest, especially in Vegas, people have crazy schedules, and you might not want to wait to find get an email back or a phone call back. So if you can teach how to find resources on your own, I would say that's ideal. And then I'm a big proponent of reading, and I know that there is so much research out there too on mentoring, mentee and mentor relationships and how to play out each role. So I would definitely suggest checking out some of that literature too. But I will pass it on to my colleagues now.
In terms of framework, one thing that I do sometimes when I'm mentoring like junior faculty, there's different levels of mentoring, right? Students, undergrads, graduate students, mentoring junior faculty is, but I would say something that I try to do is give examples of things when they go well and when they don't go well that I've experienced, so that if they have a similar situation, hopefully they'll handle it in a good way, but you know what I mean? Like, so for example, if I have an unusual situation that comes up that I've never dealt with, a lot of times I will share that with junior faculty and say, hey, I've never had this scenario before. It has come up. This is my thoughts. What do you think? Or maybe I can include them in the kind of problem solving scenario, or I can say, this is what I did. I'm not sure if I did the best thing, but if you have this scenario again, here's some ideas, on ways that are handled. So I think sharing examples, from a clinical perspective, being a therapist, I think it's we have a little bit of another hat that we wear. But sometimes in mentoring, sharing when things go well or when things don't go well, here were some of the things that happened and some of the choices or options out there. So again, helping them to kind of discover their own answers sometimes, but realizing sometimes that there are times when they ask for help and they really need a lifeline. Knowing the difference between those two, I think is really helpful.
So, I'll say something perhaps not as positive as those that have been shared, but since, I have experience with graduate students across different disciplines, I think what happens sometimes is there are presumptions made about the students or junior faculty because of their particular background, right? For example, telling a woman that you shouldn't go into this profession, or you shouldn't go into this subspecialty of this profession because there aren't many women in there, things like that, right? And there are presumptions made also about race, about linguistic ability, about whether one has an accent or not. I think mentors need to watch out for those. Those are the baggage that we bring as mentors. They have nothing to do with the mentee most of the time, but they're rather baggage that we bring to the table. So, I know there aren't many mentors on the call, but, I think mentees should also feel empowered to point that out when that happens. So I think that's why I wanted to share that. You know, if you feel like you're being told you cannot do something, you should question that, right? You shouldn't readily accept that just because a mentor is telling you that. And don't deify your mentors, right? They also come with all kinds of human frailties and prejudices and presumptions. And so you all should, as mentees, as graduate students, feel empowered to challenge those presumptions and question them and not always readily accept them.
Those
I
are
wanted
great.
to I wanted to jump in and say I agree. I've had experiences where as a student, have received messages about, being a female. I've had experiences where I've been told, well, you can't do that because you're a woman, or, coming from a mentor-like role. And I totally agree with that statement. I like the empowerment piece. And if you are assigned to a mentor, or find yourself in a situation where you don't feel supported in what you're wanting to do for whatever reason, please reach out, look through the appropriate channels to try to get, those aspirations that you want, and to not just, like you said, take that word and think, okay, well, I can't do it. I'm just going to give up, or this isn't the right place for me. Or I would encourage you to reach out to either, maybe perhaps switching a mentor if that's a possibility, or, other avenues. So I appreciate you saying that.
Oh, somebody said here, I was told by a mentor last year that I was only qualified to work in a job that required a high school diploma. Luckily, someone else told me not to listen to her now, and I am in a PhD program. That is amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I should say I can relate. I'd say at least a student or two a semester who has been told somewhere along the line that they shouldn't be in this program, or they shouldn't even apply, and they're crossing the stage this May. I know two of them, and so yes, I mean, sometimes it's not always the best advice that you might get, and you have to follow your intuition and do what you need to do to get where you want to be. I do know one person did end up switching programs like completely, and it was the best move they ever made. They're the happiest they've ever been. So it helps to hear sometimes that feedback that can motivate you to then jumpstart, something else down the road, and you look back and it feels pretty good, like I'm sure you feel right now, Catherine.
Thanks for sharing that, Val. And just to remind everyone, if that does happen to you, there are resources here. You can reach out to the graduate college, to Val here, that she speaks to students all the time that are going through these things, and talks to them about, what are different options, what else, how can we work through it. So just so you know, those resources are here. And I do know that Seval is going to be leaving us in just a couple of minutes. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity if you wanted to share any last words of wisdom before you hop off the call.
Yeah. So, I mean, I thank you for the invitation to be here. I think often people don't connect the dots that the Diversity Initiatives Office actually is here to listen to concerns and problems from all members of the university community. So I'm just going to say, feel free to reach out to me or my assistant, Ms. Yao Bang, whose information is on the Office of Diversity Initiatives website. I'm always here to listen, and if you want, act as a mentor, an unofficial mentor, right? Because like I said, I do bring with me quite a bit of experience in the recruitment process and mentoring graduate students and working with them through a variety of different issues for the last 4 years. So I'm always happy to be a resource. Thank you so much for having me on the call. It's been a pleasure chatting with all of you.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Bye,
Bye, everyone.
We do have a couple of questions in the chat too, so I'll ask Sara and Valarie to address these. So One of them is, can the panel talk a little bit about how they balance the need to proactively engage mentees with the need to have mentees own the responsibility to engage with them? I currently mentor a group of individuals who got connected to me through a process that's not necessarily their choice, so I'm constantly trying to balance between being open and available, but not interjecting myself where I'm not wanted.
I was just gonna say, is setting up that schedule with them, right? So individually or as a group, depending on how the mentorship's gonna be. Is it group mentorship? Is it individual one-on-one? Or there's some things like, they're all gonna ask. Time saving is meeting with, them in a group. If everyone's gonna ask about, a certain timeline or about the next project that's coming up or whatever it might be, if you can schedule that time. I mean, it's like professors, right? They have office hours. So you do not need to be available 24/7. And I mean, I would say set a schedule if it's going to be maybe every other week that you just have a check-in for 30 minutes. And then if they need longer, great. You can, work accordingly. But I think that's the only way you're going to get that balance. And then if you don't need the meeting, you cancel it, but at least it's on the books. So maybe you won't get 18 emails just randomly with one question each time. If your mentee knows that they're going to see you once every 2 weeks, they can hold those questions, save all the email time, and just ask them during your one-on-one. I find that to be pretty helpful. Sarah?
I would totally agree. I think creating a structure in which they know how and when to contact you and reach out is very helpful, because again, like, whether it's, I have a sign on my door, and when I'm in a meeting, it says I'm in a meeting. And then when I don't, and I can take questions or feedback from people or talk to people as they walk by, I leave my door open. So I have a very clear way, just being present here, as well as scheduled meetings, letting them know when I'm available, when we can meet, those types of things. It's the other piece I think too is, let's say they have a project to work on and they have 6 months to complete it, and they're not working on it, right? It's like nudging them without over functioning, right? So you can say, remind them, these are the deadlines. Like when I work with people on thesis or dissertations in the past, we say, okay, this is the goal, this is your timeline, it's your responsibility to do, we will meet, I will provide you with information, you need to go do your task, and then you have to come back to me. And there are students that want to meet the end goal, but they struggle to do the steps in between because, of course, everyone's busy in their schedule. So I think providing like a very, very transparent about your process, giving them tools, giving them access, having scheduled meetings, but then not doing the work for them. I've seen some mentors that will write people's theses for them because they're not on track. And that's very burdensome for the faculty member, and it doesn't serve the student, right? And so I think those are all helpful things to keep in mind too.
Thank you both. So just got another question in the chat. As a mentor, you may encounter instances where your mentee gets stuck at a certain stages during their journey. It could be due to difficulties they face during their research. In such situations, how do you assist your mentee in starting over? Do you concentrate on their areas of strength?
So how do you start over if they get stuck and they're needing perhaps, so in our program, I don't know if this is a helpful example, but we have an optional thesis. So some will start with the thesis, and for whatever reason, scheduling, they get stuck with the topic area or the timeline, and we kind of redirect them or refocus them to a research capstone or a clinical capstone. So in a mentor role, as a gatekeeping role, it is my responsibility at some point to say, look, you got 3 months left to do the proposal, or 2 months left to do the at the pace that we're at. This may not be the best option. Here are some other options in terms of other projects. So helping that, kind of giving them that information and helping them decide. And then sometimes they still, well, I still want to do it. And you've got like 2 weeks to write 3 chapters. Well, the reality of that's not going to happen in 2 weeks, and having to have those hard conversations sometimes, but yet still being there for them and saying, okay, we do have other options. This is an optional thing. You don't have to do it. So what are some ways we can take your creative ideas and build them into a project that you are able to do and that you can meet the timelines for? for it. I hope that answered the question. I'm not sure.
I would say there's almost nowhere where you need to start all over. I mean, I've had students fail their prospectus, and they don't have to start from scratch. There's usually something that can be salvaged, something that you can, spin off of or add to or edit, or even, like I was saying earlier, is if you needed to switch mentors. It's just finding that silver lining that you can build from if things, are going to change. And just know sometimes change is really good. Me changing my dissertation topic was the best idea, looking back now, that I ever had. Well, but in that instance. And another thing I want to make sure I say before we finish this workshop too is if you do a lot of in-person meetings, virtual meetings, phone calls, I find it very helpful for you to summarize those meetings and put them in email. So whether it's the mentor or the mentee, hey, it was great meeting with you today. I just want to kind of summarize what we talked about. You'll be surprised how many times you or whoever else was in the meeting could walk away with a totally different understanding of what happened during the meeting. And then sometimes it comes to the grad college and I'm like, great, okay, so let me see what you have in writing. Nobody has anything. So it helps if you have summaries after each meeting. Okay, so we said I'm going to do my prospectus. This is kind of the order I'm going to write my chapters. This are my deadlines. And then like Sara was saying that if you're getting close to deadlines and you're nowhere near them, I mean, we can cite that. We can say, okay, well, we talked about this back then. Okay, if we need to adjust things, let's adjust it now. And then put that in written email as well. It really does help protect you and the relationship and making sure everyone is always on the same page. So I definitely, that's like some of the best advice I can give.
Thank you both so much. Can you talk a little bit about some resources there are at UNLV that are available for mentoring, whether that's if I want to be mentored or if I want to kind of start exploring the role or get more knowledge in being one?
I mean, besides TGA, so the Grad Academy, obviously they have workshops every semester. And then things, if you don't make them live, you can go to the YouTube channel and search there, things that might be interesting to you. If you're trying to be are there any undergrads on here? Do we know? Thumbs up if you're an undergrad. Because I know they have a lot of programs too, depending on what college you're in. And then, like I was saying, there's, even if you just do a Google search, there's organizations, there's tons of research on it. You can come to me, you can come to somebody in your department. If there's like a faculty member, you're in a class right now, or you had a class last semester, and somebody, you really connected with them or you feel comfortable with them, going to them during office hours to talk about it. And then they may have resources. Believe me, it all snowballs and you'll end up with more info than you ever imagined. But I know making that first step, even coming to this workshop, making that first step is kind of what gets everything going. Okay, Catherine, if you see that.
Oh, Kevin said the intersection has a program for first generation students that pairs them with a mentor. This is for both undergrad and grad students. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. That's a really great resource.
That is great. I know at Texas Tech, we had this thing called Mentor Tech, and they would pair first generation undergrads with faculty members. And they had this whole program, which was really cool because a lot of times you don't have that type of relationship as an undergrad. And it really ends up fostering a lot of these undergrad students then applying for grad school. And I had one that went from undergrad to a grad student and beyond. In terms of mentoring and working with the students. So I'm glad to hear that I wasn't familiar with that program either. So that's great.
Just a reminder for our audience to feel free to ask questions of our panel. You can type it in the chat or you can unmute yourself if you want to ask. So another question we have here is, in regards to mentoring, what do you wish you knew 10 years ago?
That's a good question. Is that a new question? I don't remember that question. That's a great question. That is a good question. I mean, I think as a new assistant professor years ago, I had really good mentors. So I really relied on my experience as a student to launch me into being a mentor and making sure I continue to have a mentor as a faculty member. So for me, I just continue to learn. And so what I wished I would have known 10 years ago, um, I think I learned a lot from my mentor and not to be on a sad note, but my mentor, my long-term mentor passed away in December. And so I'm kind of at this crossroads now about looking, like as a faculty member in my position and thinking, oh my gosh, and I had thought about this, what happens when my mentor is no longer around and you get to an age and a stage in your career where your mentors are retiring and then they pass away and you're like, oh gosh. But so I'm currently at like looking for different ways that I can establish new relationships with mentors. Again, that just continuing. I don't want to ever think that I don't need a mentor because I do. And so I'm sort of in this odd, weird sort of in between phase with mentorship. And so, yeah, I don't know if Val has anything else to.
I would say I didn't know there was like guidelines or rules or things as a mentee. I didn't know I needed to be prepared as a mentee on that end. I just assumed whoever I selected to be my advisor was going to be my mentor, and they knew what to tell me, when to tell me, and I would go months without hearing from anybody. And I'd be like, is there something I'm supposed to be doing? And then I think now back to it, I'm like, I guess I should have told them that I was interested in publishing, or I should have told them I was interested in learning about grant writing, because they're not mind readers, right? No matter how close you are. So I love that y'all are asking mentee questions, because that was just not something I had thought that I needed. I mean, my mentor would say, okay, let you know, or I'd email like, I think I'm ready to write my chapters. Is that what we do next? But being more prepared, I think I would have gotten more out of the relationship. Like if I were to go in right now with something, I'd be like, I'd have all this background knowledge that I've gathered over the last 10 years, so I would know how to be a better mentee. So yeah, that's it. That's the first thing that comes to mind.
What are some tips that you all have for establishing and maintaining great communication with your mentor or advisor from, the early stages of your relationship?
I like what Val said about putting things in writing. I remember when I started working with my mentor back in 07 as a junior faculty member, every time we meet, I would write notes so that I would have those to keep, even though it was specifically focused on a research project. I just went ahead and did that. So I have years worth of just weekly meeting minutes and notes. So I think that is that could be helpful.
Yeah, I would kind of say the same thing with setting up kind of what the expectation is. Am I going to come see you? The first mentor I had was, okay, he had office hours and I would come in every other week. And then when I switched to the new advisor, he was like, just email me when you need me. They were more of a night owl and I'm a morning person. So we would catch each other at different times, but we always knew that, I mean, I was working full time and at that point, and this person's a night owl. So we would, we kind of set up that structure that I will email almost as much as I needed to, and you would respond throughout the night while I'm sleeping. But then if we really needed, in-person time, at least once a month, we would meet in person. So, you know what I mean? Things like that, where you kind of get to know each other and each other's preferences and kind of playing to those for both of you. Definitely helped with the expectations. I wasn't getting nervous that I haven't heard from them. And yeah.
I would say as a mentee, making sure you stay in communication with your mentor, because you're not the only person that they're mentoring. And it's really the onus is on you to take initiative for your own scholarship and work in progress. And so even if you haven't written anything or done anything for the week or 2 weeks in between, letting them know that, hey, I've had a crisis or a busy 2 weeks. I haven't produced anything, but I wanted to touch base with you. to me as a mentor, that goes much further than radio silence. If it's radio silence, I might think, oh, they don't care, or they're not interested, or they might slip off my radar, right? But by just communicating and keeping the updates, that's very helpful. So therefore, I'm like, oh, okay, well, is there anything that I can do to be helpful? Perhaps maybe we need to look at restructuring some things, or perhaps you might want some tips or ideas on how to structure your time, or how we could set aside some writing. So those might be some things to keep in mind too.
Thank you. So, I just got another question. Has anyone ever cut their losses with a mentee? Should you ever? And when is a good time?
I had a faculty member do it to a student this morning, and the student came to see me because they were the mentee, and that relationship was just not working any longer. And I don't need to know the details, but just know that as the student, you can cut from a mentor anytime, and the faculty also do have that right. They can excuse themselves from your committee if they want to. It does work both ways. The only thing you have to be careful of, and this has come up frequently, a couple times a semester, is the research. Who owns that research? And if you're with a mentor and they have a grant and you're working on their grant and that research theirs, you can't necessarily take it and go move and work with somebody else and take the data with you. So I've had situations where students were okay with, I'll let it go, I'm gonna start from scratch and move over to this new lab. And then I've had situations where we have an ombudsman on campus also, so they've helped, or maybe the dean's office, somebody else has helped kind of figure out where the mentee and mentor fractions are, and if the student is so close, to start all over would just take months or a year or two, how we can kind of put a band-aid on it so we can get that project done and get that dissertation done. So I would kind of evaluate your pros and cons, and I've had those situations where students, where we've hopped on a Zoom now and we've talked about the pros and cons. At the end of the day, it's your decision or the faculty member's decision. I've had students say, you know, I'm just, they're stressed, they're not sleeping, so is it worth it at that point? And then something Seval had said, that if, you know, there's unfair treatment or things like that, we have additional resources where we would refer you if it got to that point.
And Sarah, maybe you can add a little bit on the part, for example, let's say the relationship isn't with your like committee or your chair, and maybe you're a graduate student and you're mentoring an undergrad, and maybe something like that, or some, you know, maybe some other different situations, if maybe you can shed some light on that as well.
That's a great point. I think the first is, whatever role you're in, is initiating conversation about the relationship or about the working relationship. And I think, especially as in a digital age that we live in, it's easy just to ghost or disappear or not say anything, or but I think it's really important, because these relationships are important relationships, to say, hey, can we have a meeting? Can we sit down and have a talk? I feel like perhaps there's something I'm needing or wanting in this scenario, relationship, mentorship, that I'm perhaps not getting. Or on the flip side, as a graduate student mentoring an undergrad, saying, you know, I have some concerns. I've had meetings scheduled and you've no-showed the meetings. I've helped you to kind of develop a workflow and I haven't seen any productivity. Or I've provided suggestions and you haven't followed through with those. And so I'm just questioning whether this is a good fit. I think using the term as if it's a good fit. It doesn't mean that either the mentor or the mentee has a deficit or has a problem, but just the fit between the two is not a good fit. And we want to find a better fit. And so I think if we present it that way, so it's not blaming, it's not accusatory, it's not saying there's something wrong with someone, but we externalize it more and talk about the fit of the relationship, I think that's helpful. And the sooner the better. I know a lot of people will wait till things are really bad before they do anything. They say anything or they reach out. I would suggest, if things start to feel like you are having trouble sleeping or eating, or you dread meeting with your mentor or mentee, or it creates undue stress, or it's creating other issues in your you're having to focus more on that relationship versus your own scholarship or work, to not just put it off, because likelihood it's not going to get better on its own.
No, I do want to add, as the mentor, if you're serving in a mentor role, if it is something through UNLV, you should have an extra line above you that you can go to for assistance. Sometimes mentees might share sensitive information with you. And if you're in that mentor role and it is through UNLV, we do have that obligation to submit a support team referral form. So I'm going to put that in the chat here, and it gives the explanation there. You can submit it with your name or anonymously, but basically you're letting our team of experts here at UNLV know that a student would whether they realize it or not, you're going to refer them so that somebody from UNLV's training team will reach out to them, check in on them, see how they are, maybe refer resources depending on what they might need, if it's counseling services or the food pantry or whatever it might be. That the responsibility of whatever sensitive information or whatever they might be going through isn't on you solely 100% to check in on them or anything like that. I mean, as a mentor, yes, continue to check on them, but know that trained professionals are going to reach out to them. And it's always better to be safe and to go that route. So if you click on that link and if you have any questions, let us know.
Thank you for sharing that, Val.
Yeah, yes.
So thinking back on your experiences being both mentored, mentoring others, and also things you've seen through different advisor and mentee relationships, what are some of the most important lessons you've learned so far from mentoring?
I would say, as a mentee, if you're looking for a mentor, to look for someone that has qualities or traits that you aspire to have, whether that's how they deal with things interpersonally, or their line of research. And hopefully you can find somebody that you can work well with interpersonally and their research aligns. That's ideal, right? I think those are the best relationships in terms of mentoring. And in terms of a mentor, I think some of the things that having clear expectations, letting your mentee know, this is how I mentor students. We want to make sure this is a good fit for both of us. If you feel like at any point that's not, you can always have an out, so that they know at any point. I always tell my students, if you want to switch mentors, cool, totally supportive. I'm not going to be upset. It's not a personal thing to me. I'm here for your best experience. And I think as a mentor, it's very important to realize that for some people, it may hurt their feelings if someone wants to switch, but ultimately, if we're here for our students, that it's really up to them and what's the best fit for them. So even though we think things are going great, if they don't want to work with us anymore, then we want to support that. We don't want to make it awkward. We don't want to, create any friction there.
And I would just add, as the mentor, remember, the mentee doesn't know what they don't know. So like even right now, I'm in this program through a grant through academic advising, and undergrad advisors are paired up with different campus partners, and three of them are partnered up with me, and just remembering that they don't know my world precisely. They don't know maybe at the student support spot that we just opened last October. And just, and if they say, oh yeah, I know about that. Okay, great. But just remember, give them everything. And if it's stuff they already know, then they hear it again. And you don't have to go into super detail. And then as a mentee, think about what your mentor, doesn't know about you, that they're not, remember I mentioned, they're not a mind reader, and let them know if you're interested in certain things. Like, one summer I did a directed reading. It was like a 700 level class, I think, and it helped me prepare for my lit review. And looking back now, I just got to read the whole summer. It was amazing. And I would write summaries for each one and help prepare me for my comps. And then it did bring me closer to my advisor, because we got to talk about all the theories and the quantitative and qualitative methods and all those kind of things. So maybe this is the first time you've ever heard of a directed reading, right? Because it's not something maybe that's built into your step time to degree plan. And directed readings could also be independent studies. So, things like that you may have never heard of. So remember, it works on both sides. you both don't know what the other doesn't know. So yeah, just put it all out there, and someone might even say, oh, I'm not interested in that now, and then 6 months later, like, oh my God, I remember you talked about that. I want to look at that now. So you never know.
Thank you both for those key takeaways. And as we are pretty much at the end of our time today, I want to take the last couple of minutes just to thank our panelists for sharing your time, your expertise with us, and just having an honest discussion with our attendees. And thank you all for joining us for today's panel. Before everyone logs off, please just take a few minutes to fill out this survey that I'm going to drop into the chat here. This really helps us as we plan new workshops and bring new topics to you, and we kind of get to see what you're interested in. So just take a couple of minutes to fill that out. And we hope everyone has a great rest of your day and you all have a good weekend.